Hi, I'm Mabel Jensen. I'm 73 years old. And no, I'm not too old for anything, especially not for adventure. Let me tell you how this all started. It was last Thanksgiving. My entire family crammed into my daughter's house in Vermont. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, the works. I was seated at the end of the table like some kind of antique centerpiece. You know, the one people smile at politely but don't really talk to. Everyone's faces were buried in their phones. Except mine, of course. I was watching the steam rise off my mashed potatoes and thinking how bored I was. That's when my granddaughter Lily piped up. "Grandma, do you even do anything anymore?" It was innocent, I think. Kids are like that, blunt. But then her father, my son-in-law, chuckled and said, "She's earned the right to rest. At her age, travel is more trouble than it's worth." Her. Like I was some ancient oak tree that needed to stay rooted. I sipped my cider quietly, but inside I was boiling. Later that evening, I heard my daughter whispering in the kitchen. "Mom's too fragile to be flying all over. She can't even carry her suitcase." Fragile? I'd raised 3 kids, managed a bakery for 30 years, survived a hip replacement and still walked 5 miles every morning. I was not fragile, I was just underestimated. So I made a decision. The very next morning, before the snow had even stopped falling, I walked into a travel agency in Burlington. Yes, an actual travel agency. I know people do it all online these days, but I wanted someone to look me in the eye when I said, "I want to book a world tour. First class. Private where possible. And I don't want anyone to know about it." The young agent blinked, surprised. "For you, ma'am?" I smiled sweetly. "No, for my pet iguana." "Yes, for me." She laughed, and that broke the ice. Her name was Camille, and by the end of that first hour we had the whole thing mapped out. 10 countries. 4 continents. 5-star hotels. Scenic trains. Sunset yacht cruises. A private jet leg between Tokyo and Rome just because I could. And a blog. Yes, a travel blog. Camille helped me set it up. "You're going to want to document this," she said. "You're about to be the most glamorous grandma on the internet." I started packing that night. Left a simple note on my fridge. "Gone exploring. Don't wait up." My first stop? Cold, wild, and nothing like Vermont. I landed in Reykjavik in the dead of winter, stepped out of the airport and immediately felt the icy wind bite my cheeks. But I didn't care. I was out. Free. The Blue Lagoon was my first destination. I wore a deep purple bathing suit and wrapped myself in a plush white robe. There I was, soaking in the geothermal waters, volcanic rock all around me, my silver hair tied up in a bun. Tourists glanced over, probably thinking I'd taken a wrong turn on my way to a cruise ship. But then I pulled out my waterproof camera. That night I uploaded a video to my blog. Day 1. Mabel vs. the Arctic. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Didn't share the link. Just hit post. The next day I rode Icelandic horses across snow-covered lava fields. My guide Eric looked concerned when I insisted on riding solo. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I've been riding horses since before you were born," I replied. And I wasn't lying. Grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. Rode bareback until I was 18. That morning I galloped like time had reversed. Wind in my face, adrenaline pumping, I felt like I was 30 again. In Tokyo things got flashy. I stayed in a hotel that looked more like a spaceship than a building. My suite had a view of Shibuya Crossing, and I spent the evening sipping green tea while neon signs blinked like fireflies on the skyline. I ate sushi prepared by a chef who'd served 3 emperors. I wandered Harajuku in a silk kimono. I even got a custom pair of sneakers, bright red with my initials embroidered on the heel. Camille had arranged a translator to join me part-time. Her name was Aiko and she couldn't believe I was traveling alone. "You're like my grandmother," she said, "but cooler." From Tokyo I flew to Rome. This was my luxury splurge leg. Private jet. I'd never been in one before. I walked up to the aircraft with a faux fur coat draped over my arm like a movie star. The pilot greeted me by name. There were fresh roses in the cabin and a tray of macarons. I kicked off my shoes, wrapped myself in a cashmere blanket, and watched clouds roll by at 30,000 feet. In Rome, I wandered the Colosseum, tossed a coin into the Trevi Fountain, and bought myself a hand-stitched leather handbag. I'd always wanted one but told myself it was too expensive. But hey, what's the point of saving for a rainy day if you never dance in the rain? One afternoon while sipping an Aperol Spritz at a cafe in Trastevere, I checked my blog stats. Over 5,000 views. I blinked. My last post, Grandma's Jet Lag and Gelato, had apparently gone viral. People were leaving comments like, "Go Mabel, go. You're my inspiration. Who says life ends at 70? And then I saw it, my granddaughter's name. Wait, is this Grandma? Busted. By the time I reached Morocco, the entire family was watching. My son-in-law left a comment on one of my camel riding videos. Okay, you win. You're officially cooler than me. In Marrakesh, I wandered the souks, bartered like a pro, and stayed in a riad with a courtyard full of orange trees. The scent of jasmine followed me everywhere. A young man selling carpets called me Queen Mother and offered me mint tea. I bought a rug I had no room for and carried it across 3 countries just because it reminded me of fire and freedom. The blog followers grew. I was getting messages from women all over the world. Widows, retirees, nurses, teachers, saying they'd been afraid to travel alone. But if I could do it, maybe they could too. What started as a rebellion was turning into something more. Liberation. From expectations. From assumptions. From that awful phrase, "You're too old." In Cape Town, I climbed Table Mountain. In Bangkok, I took a cooking class and set my curry on fire. In Sydney, I surfed. Well, I tried to surf. Ended up with sand in my ears and a sunburn that made me look like a lobster in pearls. But I laughed. And I danced. And I lived. I wasn't just ticking destinations off a list. I was writing a new chapter, one no one saw coming. And I still had one stop left. My final stop was the Maldives. After hopping between cities full of color, chaos, and character, I needed a pause. Somewhere calm. Somewhere quiet enough to hear myself breathe again. When I landed on the island, I stepped off the seaplane onto a floating dock surrounded by water so blue it looked unreal. Like someone had poured liquid sapphire across the horizon. A young man handed me a chilled towel and a welcome drink. "Miss Jensen," he asked. I loved how they called me Mississippi. "Your overwater villa is ready." Villa. Not room. Villa. It had a glass floor so I could watch fish swim beneath my bed. I opened the sliding doors and stepped out onto the deck, where a hammock swayed above the water and a small plunge pool sparkled in the sun. I didn't know where to look first. I just stood there, hands on my hips, grinning like a fool. Later that night, as I floated on my back in the pool, I watched the stars appear one by one, like old friends coming to say hello. The next morning, I tried paddleboarding for the first time. Now let me be honest, balance isn't what it used to be. I wobbled, cursed under my breath, and fell into the water more times than I could count. But every time I splashed down, I came up laughing. A little boy on the beach clapped for me each time, shouting, "Grandma Splash." I waved back and blew him a kiss. My days in the Maldives were slow and perfect. Sunrises, fresh mango juice, naps in hammocks, books I hadn't read in years, and long calls with Camille, who was still helping me post on the blog. Speaking of the blog, it had exploded. Tens of thousands of followers. Comments from every continent. News outlets asking for interviews. I got an email from a morning show producer asking if I'd appear on live TV once I returned. Apparently, people liked watching a 73-year-old grandma hopscotching the globe in pearls and aviators. But something else happened too. People started sharing their own stories. Photos of women in their 60s and 70s on mopeds in Vietnam, hiking in Patagonia, learning to tango in Buenos Aires. All inspired by this little rebellion I'd started. I didn't expect that. I just wanted to prove a point. Turns out I lit a spark. One afternoon I sat at the edge of my deck, feet dangling in the water, when I received a message that made me cry. It was from Lily, my granddaughter. The same girl who'd said I didn't do anything anymore. She wrote, "Grandma, I was wrong. You're incredible. You're living the life I dream of. I've been following every post. You've inspired me. I just applied for my first passport. I want to see the world like you." I read it again and again, the words blurring through my tears. It was never about proving them wrong. It was about showing them what's still possible. After a week in paradise, I boarded a flight back to New York. I was tanned, tired, and totally transformed. At JFK, I walked through the arrivals gate, dragging my little red suitcase behind me. My daughter stood waiting with her mouth open. My son-in-law gave me a slow clap. Lily ran up and threw her arms around me. "Next time," she said, "you're not going without me." I laughed. Next time you carry the bags. The reunion was warm. They weren't mad, just shocked. I'd vanished, globe-trotted, and reappeared like a magician. A very glamorous, slightly jet-lagged magician. Back home, I found that even my quiet Vermont neighborhood had heard of me. One neighbor brought over a pie and called me Jet Set Mabel. Another asked me to help plan her retirement trip. I told her, only if we're going first class. I went on that morning show, wore my favorite silk scarf, and told the world exactly what I thought of being called too old. And then the offer started. A travel gear company asked me to be a brand ambassador. A publishing house offered me a book deal. A small tour company wanted to launch a Golden Wanderers package, curated by yours truly. But the best offer came from an email titled, "Want to keep exploring?" It was from Camille. She'd partnered with a startup that curated private group tours for adventurous women over 60. They wanted me to lead one. Not as a guide but as a host, sharing stories, encouraging others, showing them that it's never too late. I said yes. And just like that, I was planning another journey. The blog kept growing. I renamed it She Didn't Stay Home and added a tagline under the header, "Travel Stories from the Road Less Expected." I still get comments from people who say things like, "I wish I could do what you did." And I always reply the same way. Who says you can't? I don't care if you're 43, 63, or 83. The world doesn't stop just because your joints ache or your hair turns silver. You can still swim with turtles in the Maldives. Still eat pizza in Rome. Still get lost in a Tokyo street market and come out laughing. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to wait for someone to come with you. You just have to go. The biggest adventure isn't the destination. It's choosing yourself after everyone else thinks they know what's best for you. I chose me. Finally. Fully. And I'm not done yet. I'm headed to Patagonia next. Glaciers, penguins, the works. But that's a story for another time. Patagonia was wild. Beautiful, brutal, and absolutely the kind of place you'd think someone like me had no business being in. Which is exactly why I went. I landed in El Calafate on a windy afternoon, my boots laced tight, my thermal jacket zipped up to my chin, and my backpack stuffed with everything a glamorous grandmother might need for trekking across glacier country. Trail mix, a pocket-sized journal, and a bright red lipstick. Because yes, you can look fabulous while freezing your behind off. My driver, a wiry man named Nicholas, met me with a crooked smile and a placard that read, "Mabel the Legend." I laughed so hard I nearly slipped on the curb. "You've heard of me?" I asked. He nodded. "My sister follows your blog. Showed me your camel riding video. She said, 'Look, this is how I want to be when I'm old.'" I liked Nicholas immediately. We drove through long stretches of untouched land, snow-dusted mountains rising like the backs of sleeping dragons. There were more sheep than people. No traffic, no high-rises, no noise. Just the occasional gust of wind strong enough to shake the van. My hotel was tucked into the hillside overlooking Lake Argentino. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft flannel bedding, and the cleanest air I'd ever breathed. I stood on the deck that first night wrapped in a blanket, sipping mate tea, watching the stars emerge one by one. The next day I met my trekking group. 6 women. All over 60. All readers of my blog. I couldn't believe it. "Mabel," one asked. "Is it really you?" I smiled. Last I checked. They'd booked the tour when they saw the post Camille had uploaded about the new Golden Wanderers experience. I hadn't expected to meet blog readers face to face, let alone climb a glacier with them. But here we were, 7 silver-haired adventurers in crampons and fleece, walking toward the Perito Moreno Glacier like we were on a mission from the universe. The glacier was massive. Towering walls of blue ice groaned as they shifted, cracks echoing across the valley like distant thunder. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. I stood at the base for a long moment, letting the cold sink into my bones, watching chunks of ice crash into the lake below. This was not a grandma-friendly destination. There were no easy paths, no hot cocoa stands, no comfy benches for resting. And yet I felt more alive here than I had at any cozy resort. We hiked with guides across icy ridges and frozen caverns. I fell twice, but who didn't? One of the women, June, a retired firefighter from Ohio, helped me up both times. We laughed until our ribs hurt. By the third fall, I was posing dramatically in the snow while they snapped photos for the blog. One afternoon, we sat on a rocky outcrop sharing chocolate and stories. Barbara had survived cancer. Petra had divorced at 62 and moved to Mexico alone. Rita lost her husband last year and said this was her first real breath of freedom. We weren't just travelers. We were reclaiming something. Courage maybe. Or joy. I used to think life after 60 was just waiting, Petra said. Waiting for visits, for phone calls, for grandkids. But look at us. We're climbing glaciers. That night I posted a blog entry titled, "This is not a waiting room." The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments. One woman wrote, "I've been sitting in that waiting room for 10 years. Time to walk out the door." I teared up reading that. Because that had been me too. After Patagonia, we flew to Buenos Aires. The city felt like music. Vivid, alive, constantly moving. We stayed in San Telmo, where tangos spilled out of every doorway and art covered the walls like confetti. One of the women arranged for us to take a tango lesson. I tried to decline. My joints aren't as nimble as they used to be, but the instructor insisted. "Dancing is not about age," he said in a thick accent. "It's about surrender." He took my hand and we moved. Slowly at first, then quicker, more fluid. My steps weren't perfect, but they were mine. And for a few minutes I forgot about my age, my knee, the fact that I was sweating like I'd run a marathon. When the music ended, everyone clapped. I did a little curtsy and nearly toppled over. Back at the hotel I looked at myself in the mirror. Flushed cheeks, tired eyes, tangled hair, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked so happy. That evening we had wine on the rooftop. It was our last night together. I toasted to my fellow wanderers. To the women who didn't stay home. They all raised their glasses. We hugged tightly the next morning at the airport. There were promises to meet again, to travel again, to keep this momentum going. I believed every word. I returned to Vermont a few days later. The leaves were beginning to turn. Autumn in full swing. My daughter picked me up from the airport and said, "You've got that Patagonia glow." I just smiled. Back home I found my fridge covered in postcards from my new friends. My blog had reached 100,000 subscribers. An email from a travel magazine offered me a monthly column. Another from a retirement community in Florida asking me to speak at their annual gala. And tucked into the bottom of my bag I found a note that one of the women had slipped in. "You changed our lives. And you didn't even mean to. Thank you, Mabel." I sat on my porch that evening, the sky soft with dusk, and thought about how far I'd come. Not just the miles, but the years. How many times I'd been told to slow down, to be careful, to act my age. But the truth is, I am acting my age. My age is curious. It's brave. It's full of stories and scars and belly laughs and soft wrinkles earned through living. It's the age of yes. Yes to the glacier. Yes to the dance. Yes to the next plane ticket. Because life doesn't give out gold stars for sitting still. And I don't plan on slowing down. Not now. Not ever. I didn't expect to go viral. But somehow the video of me dancing tango in Buenos Aires, wearing a red scarf and slightly out of breath, ended up on social media with over 2 million views. The caption someone added was, "Grandma said no to bingo night and yes to the world." And that became the catchphrase. TV shows started calling me the Jet Set Grandma. Someone even created a TikTok edit of my travels with background music by Billie Eilish. My granddaughter Lily showed me. "You're trending, Grandma." I didn't know what trending meant, but I liked how it sounded. Everywhere I went, strangers stopped me. In airports, cafes, even the pharmacy. A man in his 40s approached me in San Francisco and said, "My mom's flying to Paris next month because of you. She hasn't flown in 20 years. Another woman, maybe in her early 30s, hugged me in a bookstore. "You're the reason I stopped putting my dreams on pause until I had time. I'm going to Thailand next week." All I'd done was say yes to myself. And the world had responded with a chorus of its own. Still, all this attention felt strange. I hadn't set out to become a symbol or a social media icon. I just wanted to prove, mostly to myself, that life wasn't over just because I had white hair and took calcium supplements every morning. And yet something had shifted in me too. I wasn't just traveling for fun anymore. I was traveling with purpose. So I started planning the next trip, not just for me but for a new kind of journey. One that would take others with me. Camille and I launched the She Didn't Stay Home tours. Small groups. All women over 60. Carefully curated adventures that weren't about checking off tourist traps but about rediscovering self-worth, laughter and courage. The first tour was Tuscany. 10 women. Rolling hills. Long dinners under the stars. Olive oil tastings. Cooking classes with flour everywhere and old love songs playing on the radio. I remember one woman, Susan, crying quietly while kneading pasta dough. "This is the first time I've done something just for me in 20 years, she said. We hiked through vineyards, told stories under the moonlight, and toasted to second chances. And the laughter, we laughed like teenagers. Like we'd stolen something precious from the clock. In one of the villages, a little Italian girl asked if we were famous. I looked around at these women, silver hair catching the sunlight, arms linked, eyes lit up with mischief, and I said, yes. Yes, we are. After Tuscany came Egypt. Then Vietnam. Then Croatia. Each journey brought new faces, new layers of healing. And with every passport stamp, my purpose became clearer. This wasn't about escaping life. It was about entering it. One night, in a lantern-lit courtyard in Hoi An, I sat journaling after the others had gone to bed. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. I wrote. I used to think my story was winding down, that the best parts had already happened. But now I know, life doesn't shrink unless you let it. My story isn't ending. It's expanding. Back home things had changed too. My daughter started taking weekend trips with her husband again. "You inspired me, Mom," she said. Lily enrolled in a study abroad program and backpacked across Europe. My son-in-law? He bought a tandem kayak and tried to convince me to join him for a lake tour. "Maybe next summer," I told him. "Let me recover from surfing in Bali first." And for me? I bought a small cottage by the sea. Nothing grand. Just a quiet place with big windows, a lemon tree out front, and a hammock where I can lie and watch the clouds when I'm not in the air myself. I still travel. Oh yes. In the last year I've visited 14 countries, spoken at 3 women's conferences, and sipped tea with a princess in Jordan. True story. Camille has the photo. But more than that, I've met people. Brave people. Curious people. People who decided that fear wouldn't hold the pen to their life story anymore. We're not too old. We're just getting warmed up. I remember something my husband used to say before he passed. You don't need a map to find adventure. Just a yes in your chest. He was right. All it took was one yes. One decision not to stay seated. Not to be quiet. Not to believe them when they said, "You're too old." I was never too old. I was just waiting to remember who I was. Now I fly first class. I write. I dance. I laugh loudly in foreign cities. I book surprise tickets and don't tell anyone where I'm going. I sleep under stars and sometimes forget what day it is. I wake up each morning and think, where next, Mabel? And I hope, more than anything, that someone reading this, someone sitting at home with a full heart and an empty suitcase knows this. It's not too late. Pack the bag. Book the flight. Ignore the voices. Go live. Because there's a whole world out there waiting to be loved by someone just like you. And the best part? You don't need anyone's permission. You just need your passport. And a little bit of rebellion.